Hi everybody and welcome to another episode of Bored to Death. Today we're going to be reviewing Exodus: Edge of Extinction. Now this is an expansion to one of my favorite games right now actually called Exodus Proxima Centauri. You might recognize here the Dice Tower seal of approval. Hi Tom. And that's it. We're going to be reviewing the expansion and well, I don't want to give anything away, so just check it out. Edge of Extinction will expand your Exodus game, and for this review, we'll concentrate on it and its setup and assume you've already played the base game. Most notably, Edge of Extinction offers new faction player sheets. Randomly select one or choose them according to their strength and difficulty level marked in the rulebook. Now each player will also place their unique race technology board next to the base games. Players will replace the base action cards with the new faction action cards. Shuffle all the new politic cards with the base games and do the same for the Centurion resistance cards. Create separate decks for the combat cards and Centurion resistant combat cards, and each player will receive the extra population cubes and ships. As an addition to the base game setup of ships and cubes on home planets, each player will add one raider and one population cube on an adjacent planet. For the starting resources, each player will be different based on their faction. Listed on their faction sheet, you'll also find unique special abilities, upgrades, and technologies descriptions, and then new steps in each turn and space combat structures apply to all. The upkeep stage remain pretty much the same. During the council stage, the last step you'll do will have you draw combat cards. The number drawn will depend on the number of players as listed on the table in the rulebook. These can be used in combat, which we'll talk about when we get there. Hand limit for these is 6 and is enforced at all times, so if you ever go over, you need to choose and discard until you have your max. The action stage remain pretty much the same, but what's interesting to note is the faction action cards have changed dramatically. These are all unique to each faction, where some will always have certain strengths, like the Titans with research, or include bonuses, penalties, or abilities that are so strong that won't allow you to do a reaction or are simply removed from the game after one use. With the Fire WMD stage, home planets can now be targeted aside from graviton rockets. But some of the biggest changes will come in the next stage, Conquest. In the Conquest stage, some movement options are available that change the game quite dramatically. The one that is recommended is called the Drive Power movement. Unlike the base game, the movement tokens won't be needed. Rather, always in reverse turn order, the players will move all their ships adjacent one hex. Then, again in reverse orders, player will move an additional adjacent hex with ships with fusion drive. Repeating the process again, this will be done for ships with anti-gravity and lastly with hyperspace drive. This change removes the anticipation aspect of the base game with the tokens, but adds more importance to the drive upgrades and player order. When ships from different players and or Centurion end their move on the same hex, a battle happens as in the base set with a couple of changes. In reverse turn order, a player may play a combat card face down. When all players have chosen the cards, they are revealed. Some will tell you when they can be played, like first combat round or any combat round. Only one card per player may be played every round. Should a player face a Centurion ship, the player controlling it will draw 2 Centurion resistant combat cards, choose one, and place it face down next to the drawn Centurion resistant card. Again, the player in the combat may choose to play a card as well face down and reveal them in the first round of combat. Victory points are pretty much scored the same, but just keep in mind the new technologies that will award more points at the end game. I haven't enjoyed an expansion as much as this since Mage Knight's The Lost Legion. Exodus: Edge of Extinction defines the word expansion, whereas some other games use it but really just mean add-on. This introduces sublime new mechanics with movement, new technologies, upgrades and factions that guide a player to play a certain way without forcing them to play it specifically that way. And if that's not enough for replay value, which this expansion is great on, the game includes new modes from solo, recommendations, and customizations with what rules the group wants to play with. One we haven't talked about was the option rule for ship blocking. Should your ship be in a hex with an opponent's ship with lower speed or drive, you can choose to block its next movement. I think they've really balanced out some weaknesses in the base game, like drives not being as important and the importance of player order, with this expansion to give the players an even more rounded experience. And this in turn really enhanced the tactics and strategies of the game. Now the new factions are double-edged swords, because they're purposely not balanced to give handicaps to stronger player, and that's fine, but in a group where everyone is equal, those little slight advantages can become quite a force to reckon with. Sure, it's up to players to remember this and attack that player, but it kind of feels a little forced to do that from the get-go. So best thing to do is to have the choice of factions varying 1 point of difficulty each based on the amounts of players. But I want to state that this really is more of a pet peeve on our part, so only half a point penalty. The other little pet peeve we found was that the Centurion resistant combat cards were very swingy in terms of how effective or devastating they are. Some made the red Centurion just as good as if they had no cards, and others made blue Centurions be stronger than the reds. So this added a little more randomness to the game, but again, not so much so only a half point penalty there. I mean, besides these little details, the expansion is pretty much perfect. And what's best, they found a way to implement all these great changes in a very light learning curve. If you know the base game well enough, you'll get these rules extremely fast with a great and rewarding experience. We can't stress enough that if you love the base game, get Exodus Edge of Extinction. You won't regret it. Definitely staying in our collection, it gets a well-deserved 9 out of 10. Seriously, get it.